Hello, I'm Sarah, and this is my critical review of Benjamin Binder's In Search of Song. This is a quick overview of my arguments. Benjamin Binder's analysis of Schlechtes Wetter challenges the methodological assumptions assumed in generating hermeneutics of the lied. Readers of lied scholarship often assume that interpretation regarding musical elements are drawn from textual influences. However, Binder refutes this claim, citing the compositional process of Schlechtes Wetter as reframing the creation of hermeneutics as a fluid process, with each act of performance building momentum to create meaning that is malleable and unique to each presentation of the lied. It challenges the perceived stability of interpretation, allowing Binder to redefine song as a musico-poetic text in search of performance. Through this argument, he exposes two fallacies of textual analysis identified by Kofi Agawu. First, that links between the musical elements are ad hoc, being drawn from logical conveniences that aren't a true indication of connection. Secondly, that text analysis assumes that poetry precedes the music. Rejecting the notion of an inverse relationship, it dismisses music as an interpretive source. Due to these limitations, Binder proposes an alternative approach supported by meta-readings of Strauss's song. By contextualizing Schlechtes Wetter as a song composed to prompt ideas, it creates irony among analysts who consider text as an authoritative source of interpretation. Binder draws on Lawrence Zbikowski's approach of conceptual blending, that text, music, and performance have equal potential in shaping the meaning of the lied. This input is applied to Lisbeth Schumann's 1921 performance of Schlechtes Wetter. Binder claims that audiences reminded of Schumann's recent portrayal of the sweet Sophie in the Rosenklavia would have interpreted the daughter's demand for cake, not as a bratty insistence, but as a sweet request from the timid Sophie. However, this presents a contradiction within Binder's argument. If his central idea that performance creates interpretations that are malleable and unique to each listener, the assumption that the collective audience perceives the daughter as Sophie cannot be held, fixing a meaning that he claims unfixable. What is to say that the 1921 audience didn't read or attend the Rosenklavia, or if the audience was reminded of Schumann in a different role? Furthermore, while Binder claims to be part of a greater transition towards pro-performance, such tendencies spearheaded by Caroline Abate and Susan Kuzik, his methodology realizes what Abate terms Gnostic approaches, processes contingent on fixed sources rather than the drastic, the pure experience of performance. Binder uses primary sources such as recital notes from the Baltimore Sun, Washington Times, and Cincinnati Enquirer, and program notes of the time, suggests his interpretation is reconstructed from documents rather than purely performance analysis. It could be argued that this reliance on text was unavoidable, as there is no time machine and no recording of the 1921 performance exist, only allowing Binder to recreate the performance through archival sources, a practice often used by historians to create educated views of the past. However, it doesn't resolve the tension between his differing methodology and conclusion, only serving to acknowledge that performance scholarship is at its most convincing when supported by recordings or live performances rather than archival sources. But it is important to note that this paradox is not unique to Binder. By definition, the drastic is resistant to the very act of documentation. To write about the lived experience of performance naturally converts itself into a fixed Gnostic object. This impossibility of an either-or existence is a symptom of an issue in performance studies rather than a fault of Binder. This repositions Binder as a scholar and raises questions whether his approaches could genuinely be categorized as pro-performance as he promotes. Despite the conclusion of this article aligning itself with post-structuralists such as Abate and Susan Kuzik, Binder's methodology has seeming parallels towards the older and more traditional models of analysis that he refutes, suggesting that the transition to a completely performance-centered scholarship is incomplete and points towards the need of research to focus solely on performance. My thesis seeks to address this gap, extending Binder's malleable lied theory to encompass performance decisions, examining how the transformation of piano motifs affects the way which audiences perceive characters in the lied. Using a methodology rooted in the act of performance itself, comparing original recordings of performance and allowing analysis and meaning to accrue as the music develops.